started.
Welcome to the Hellion Rocks. In order to keep bringing you music that is hard to find, and there's gems out there, we've got a new guest today. That music is coming out that it's really touching, and it really hits me in a good way. And we have with us today Adrian Galysh.
Hi, how are you?
Man?
Doing great.
Excellent. I'm glad that we hooked up on Facebook, because, like I said, there's a ton of music out there. There's not as many outlets for it anymore. Corporate radio only plays what they feel that they're going to make money off of. And the outlet for great music is sites like what we're doing right here, right now. And tell us about your music.
Wow, where to begin? Let whatever happens happen, meaning I don't think to myself, is this, going to be a metal song? Is this going to be a rock song? Is this going to be a vocal song, instrumental? But in a nutshell, for the last 15 years, I've been writing and recording, performing my own original instrumental guitar music until recently, where I've had some vocal songs on my new album. And of course, like most guitarists out there, my influences might be, Eddie Van Halen, Joe Satriani, Yngwie, all those guys from the 80s and the 70s. But generally, the guys from the 70s and the 80s are probably my biggest, influences. And I think my music kind of reflects what I listen to, as well as, has my own stamp on it. But like I said, mostly instrumental music, all, Jeff Beck, Eric Johnson, Satriani, those kinds of guys.
Beautiful. I know you cite those musicians from the 70s and the 80s. I feel that time period, it hadn't been tainted yet with, the downfall of the music industry that everybody says, and people were still making music for the love of making music, and that translates into some iconic songs. And in listening to your music, I can hear that influence, and I can hear the fact that you're making music for the love of music.
Most definitely. When I think of bands from the 70s, I think of Deep Purple, Rainbow, early Scorpions, UFO, and then even Van Halen and stuff like that. And, I listen to old Michael Schenker records and things, and, they'll have the 8-minute song, they'll have the hit that was, 3.5 minutes long, but you'll also hear, an organ solo or a guitar solo, and they were really just making it, music for themselves that turns out, a lot of people liked. And I think you kind of can't go wrong. There's a lot of people that try to chase whatever might be popular at this moment, and if you keep doing that, you'll never, find your own voice, really. So I never, ever tried to chase whatever was popular.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. There's a lot of, not to detract from things, but there's a lot of songs now that you hear them, they get popular for, let's just say, 5 minutes, and then you'll never hear them again. Or, they don't achieve iconic status.
Correct.
There are songs from our past that you hear them and you're going to constantly hear them, and they have achieved that status, and they're anthemic, and they're going to.
And the bummer is to me, the bummer is these days, those kinds of artists and those kinds of songs, and if it came out now, nobody would ever hear, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road or, Freebird, stuff like that.
Right.
It would have never happened in this day and age. There's definitely a formula with what's going on in pop music these days.
And I agree wholeheartedly that they're making music now to capitalize on a moment, to capitalize on making money. And it's unfortunate that that has happened. And, you can't fault an artist for wanting to make money, because, in the industry, it's so hard to survive, especially today. So, but, you can't really fault them for wanting to make money, but then, we're losing an art form.
Yeah, in this day and age, I think the biggest challenge for any artist, if you're independent like myself, or even on a label, is, people honestly consider music to be free. So the real challenge is how do you actually keep being able to make music in an era where people consider music literally free. If they want to hear something, they go online and they find it and they get it. And whether it's through Spotify or download sites or whatever, that's probably the toughest thing. Luckily, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and early 2000s, people could actually sell a physical CD, and that's kind of where the money came from. But, it's a new challenge and a new day, and the good news is you're talking to me and I'm talking to you, and this wouldn't have happened without Facebook and the Internet and all the things that, enable that. So, I can get a broader audience than I probably ever had. The challenge is, monetizing it, and I face the same problems that most record labels do.
Exactly. So,
it's a matter of playing live and coming up with, new kinds of ideas and products and things like that. In addition to my music, I sell, I've got a book, I know that I appeal to guitarists, so I do lessons, and I've got instructional materials and books and videos and things of that nature.
Nice. Where can that be found?
Say that again?
Where can we find that, your books and...
all of this can be found at my website. I mean, you can order these online anywhere, but probably the quickest is through my website. So that's adriangalysh.com, ADRIANGALYSH.com.
Nice. So you as a guitar player, how did you get there? How did you get here? Did you have formal training? Did it just call to you one day? What led you to this path?
I had a friend of the family who was much older than me. I was probably like 8, 9, 10, 11, and I had already started listening to hard rock and metal, which is kind of bizarre, but it's probably because my older brothers were. And this would have been in the early 80s, and I'm 38 now, so when I was like 8 or 9, that would have been 83, 84. I was listening to the Scorpions already. I was listening to the Motley Crue, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and I was the only kid on the playground, listening to Van Halen and stuff like that. And eventually, listening, I knew I liked the music, and this friend of the family let me listen to an album, Blizzard of Oz by Ozzy Osbourne. And, of course, the first time I heard songs and guitar solos like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley and Revelation Mother Earth by Randy Rhoads, I was hooked. I was like, man, this is really exciting stuff to listen to. This is, whoever this is, and this is way before the Internet, I couldn't even imagine what Randy Rhoads looked like, let alone, sounded like, until I heard this cassette. I was like, man, if hearing this music and this guitar playing is this exciting, I wonder how exciting it would be to actually learn how to play the guitar. And I begged my folks, probably for about 2 years, to let me get a guitar and take guitar lessons. And my folks, being kind of old-fashioned, were like, eventually they caved in when I was about 12, and they said, yeah, we'll start taking you in for guitar lessons to this local store, but we're getting you a classical guitar because, none of this rock and roll foolishness. You're going to learn to play guitar for real. But in my mind, I was like, well, that's fine. Randy Rhoads played classical guitar. I want to play classical guitar. I want to be just like this Randy Rhoads guy, whoever this guy is. And I started taking lessons on, and what's funny is they bought me a classical guitar, but the guitar teacher was a jazz guitarist. So I was learning jazz on a classical guitar with the occasional classical riff here, and of course he would show me Crazy Train and Back in Black and songs like that in between. But I didn't really know any better. I just figured all music was music, and I kind of absorbed it like a sponge. Whatever he showed me, I was very rabid and very passionate about it. And the more I got into guitars, then I started discovering guys like, I remember my band director, because I played clarinet in grade school, and now everybody knows this. He was a cool dude, a guy named Rick, and he said, Adrian, you got to check out, I know you're taking guitar lessons, but I've got this album. It's called Flexible by Steve Vai. This dude used to play for Frank Zappa. Check it out. And I got that, and I'm like, holy cow, what is this? And before you know it, I'm just buying everything related to guitar. And that took me through high school, of course, where I did, continued lessons, played in the high school jazz band. And then eventually, when it came time to go into college, Of course, my folks at first thought that music in college and, what a waste of money, and now you got to kind of figure out what you need to do for real, get a real job, be an accountant, a lawyer, or a doctor or something like that. And it just turned out, man, I just couldn't do that. And the more we went to different schools to visit colleges, and the more they got to see, the universities with music programs and people actually making careers out of it, I think the more they let me or were okay with letting me pursue music that much more serious. So I ended up going to a college, Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and got a music degree there. I got a bachelor's degree in audio engineering and jazz guitar. And did that for 4 years. Came back to my hometown of Virginia after that. I was living in the D.C. area. Taught music on and off since I was 18. So that place that I was taking music lessons from, when I would be home in the summer, they would let me teach there. And pretty much doing everything I could to mimic Randy Rhoads' life. So just like Randy, he used to teach at his mom's place where he used to take lessons. Eventually, I started and I'm kind of doing the same thing. And literally, I've been teaching for about 20 years now. And I find that teaching really kind of keeps my chops up and keeps me engaged and, really focuses me on, helps me focus on what it is I'm doing. And if I can explain it to somebody who has no idea about music, then I can certainly be more secure in knowing what I'm doing. So that's kind of, what got me here. I would say a bit of it is academic. A bit of it is I never had a rock guitar teacher. It was either classical lessons, jazz lessons, something like that. And everything that sounds rock and roll that I do, I kind of figured out on my own.
Cool, and that makes it more personal. I was fortunate.
Yeah.
And I actually got to see Randy perform a couple of months before he passed away. And, what a performer. I'm glad to see that, he influenced you on that. So excellent.
I'm so envious. I get to live vicariously through a few people that I know that either knew him or, talked to him or saw him perform.
All right. Well, I know you've got a brand new record coming out, Tone Poet.
Yeah.
And it's gonna drop December 3rd. I have been very fortunate, and I've got a chance to listen to it, and I have a review coming on it pretty soon. Take us through that record, man.
Sure. Tone Poet was kind of a long time coming, meaning, man, for a few years, like 5 years ago through maybe 2 years ago, I was sort of in a funk. I was unable to write music. I just wasn't into whatever it is I was hearing, and I had kind of a writer's block. I have a home studio here, and at the time, everything that I kind of was recording, because as you know, a lot of this music has this orchestral element to it, just wasn't sounding real enough to my ears, and it was kind of a bummer because I knew every time I tracked something, this was just going to sound like a demo, and I was never going to release it. But as maybe some active musicians out there know these days, there's a whole lot of technology out there between, Pro Tools and Logic and virtual sound instruments and things like that that really enable musicians to, produce amazing sounding records, on a lower budget, which as an independent artist is fantastic. So a couple of years ago, I started going through ideas. I started getting a bigger, better studio put together here that I knew I could produce great sounding music in, and contacted some people that I knew that I wanted to work with. One of them was vocalist Mark Bowles. And I had met Mark, who people mostly know through his work with Yngwie Malmsteen's Trilogy album. Met him a number of years ago as my regular bass player. A guy named Philip Bino played in a band with him called Ring of Fire. And we would always end up, running into each other. And one day I get a call from Uli John Roth to do a big, Willie John Roth and Friends All-Star Concert or something like that in 2007. And they're like, Adrian, we need some more vocalists for this concert. Do you know anybody? I go, well, there's this Mark Bowles guy. I know that he does a cover of, the Scorpions song, Sails of Charon, on Ingrid's album. Man, he could be great. Let me give him a call. So I called up Mark, convinced him to come down to the show and sing, which turned out great for him because Willie loved his vocals and his performance and ended up hiring him for Willie's next album and tour. And then, of course, Mark is like, hey, I owe you one. And I'm like, cool, I want you to sing on my album. And so we started co-writing some tunes about a year and a half ago. And those are the 4 vocal songs that you hear on there. And the vocal songs, it's a real stretch for me to do vocals. I've never done written vocal songs before. I know what good vocal songs, rock songs should sound like, though. And luckily for me, I had one of the best singers on the planet, Mark Bowles, to work with. So all the riffs and the ideas I had. And just like in this day and age, I would literally email him the demos with, me doing electronic drums and bass and guitar parts. And he would come up with, a few verses and a chorus. So once I got his melodies, verses, and choruses, he would send those back. And I'd go, so this is kind of how this is shaping up. Perhaps I need an extra verse here, a double chorus there, and I can stick my solos there. And the songs were written pretty quickly that way. And then once we kind of had solidified songs, he would kind of do some rewriting and tracking at his place, send me his vocal tracks, and then we would be done there. And then the rest of the album has a buddy of mine, a guy named Todd Zuckerman, who a lot of people would know from the band Styx. He's been in Styx, I guess, from 1996 till now. And he's a fantastic drummer. And I used to live in Sherman Oaks here in Los Angeles, and he lived literally a block away. And I think it was through my roommate at the time who we ended up meeting each other. And we just started hanging out pretty often, and I would give him songs, and he'd be like, man, one day, I'd love to work with you. But he eventually moved to Austin, Texas. Right before the big housing bubble, he cashed out on a house here in L.A. and moved down to Texas, where I'm sure he's living like a king now. And that was like maybe 5 years ago. And so when I finally got these tracks, I gave him a call, said, hey, it would be great to have him on here. When can you do it? And literally his tracks were recorded a year ago, last summer, not this past summer, but the one before. And he knocked out about 5 songs in one day on his day off. Flew in from a Styx tour on a Sunday, tracked on a Monday, flew back out on a Tuesday. But he's a badass. He's awesome. I totally think he's a guy that's up there with, your Terry Bozio's and, Steve Smith's and all the other greats. And he played on the instrumental tracks. He heard all the tracks I sent, and he goes, man, I honestly have just, a day. Let me pick my favorite songs, and that's what I want to go with. So I go, okay. And so that's what I got. And rounded it out. I played most of everything else, guitar, acoustic guitars, a lot of the keyboards, piano, anything orchestral that you hear there is what I put together. And then a few tracks has my buddy Philip Bino on bass. But it took a long time between everybody's schedules to kind of organize, a day and a time between that and my budget. And then the actual cost of mixing and then mastering and then finally making the album. This was probably a 2-year effort. But the 2 years also gave me a lot of time to make sure that all the tracks sound great, that all the performances are good. I was going in there, I'm kind of a guy who likes, a comfortable pair of jeans, and I think the perfect performance isn't the technically perfect performance. It's the one that feels the best. And I always kept that in mind, but there have been, albums I've done where there'll be like one small part that'll just bug me for the rest of my life, and that doesn't exist on this album. I like how everything turned out. So finally, I think I've got the album I've been trying to make for the last 15 years.
Awesome. I know. I'm glad you said that it feels right, because it's my firm belief that music is part of who we are as a race, as beings. You know, music is everywhere. It's in the wind. It's in the water running through the rocks. It's everywhere we look. There's music, and it touches us on a deep level. And when I listen to music, you know, I feel it, and when I see a live performance, I love to see, you know, I want to see a perfect thing. I want to see the artist feeling what they're playing, and I'm glad you said that.
You know, and in addition, I've had this conversation with other folks. You know, we talk about some of the great technical guitarists out there. I won't name any names, but when I see them live, sometimes it bums me out to see it look so easy for them. Meaning, you know, this is rock and roll. I kind of like the high wire aspect of seeing somebody pushing himself to the limits, and sometimes if it's somebody who feels kind of limitless, you lose that high wire excitement and aspect.
Right.
If that makes sense.
I get it. So we're talking about Tone Poet. There's one track in particular that I kept coming back to, and that's Flying. I'm going to go ahead and play that. We're going to come back and talk about that in a second.
Sure thing.
So we'll be back in a few minutes.
So tired of this old town. There's nothing
All right, that was Adrian Galysh, Flying, off of Tone Poet. Tell me a little bit about that track, man.
Sure thing. So the main riff that you hear that the song starts off with, that da-da-da-da-da-da, that was probably actually, this is the first song I think I wrote for this album. I've had that riff for probably, like I said, 5 or 6 years. And I knew that this was going to be a vocal song. And this is kind of what started the whole idea of me including vocals on one of my albums, was this particular riff. I was like, man, I could play guitar over this, but it isn't going to be nearly as cool as making this, into a vocal song. And I knew that it had this sort of Middle Eastern kind of thing I could do to it, but at the same time be very earthy sounding, very, there's a lot of acoustic guitars and just plain old Les Paul through Marshall kind of sound. But I knew I could kind of make it sound or take it somewhere else. I have to admit that I probably, we all beg, borrow, and steal. I would say that the influence for that song, believe it or not, would be Kit Winger. His solo work, if anybody out there hasn't heard it, the guy is brilliant. It's Peter Gabriel meets, David Gilmour meets the Beatles meets, Van Halen. And he's got a few songs from an album called This Conversation Seems Like a Dream that I've always liked. And I was trying to come up with the same vibe as some stuff I heard on that album. And because I just liked how sexy the groove is, and that kind of just intimate kind of sound. The vocals and the lyrics is Mark Bowles. He came up with most of it. He would give me lyrics, email them to me. I would hear them. I would send them back, maybe 1-word, 2-word phrase changes, things like that, just to kind of, let it tell a more cohesive story. In that song, though, you'll hear a very bizarre breakdown in the middle, and that's where the dual guitar solo is. And it was such a bizarre solo section because rhythmically it's in some kind of odd amount of meters, and it never felt right. But I happened to get 2 takes that were supposed to be 1 take, and I was like, well, maybe instead of 1 long take, I can just make this sound like 2 guitars kind of, interacting and interweaving with each other, and that seemed to work out best. And when I hear that now, I kind of hear sort of my Michael Schenker influence. To me, the guitar tone is very much Schenker and Willie John Ross and kind of Scorpions influenced. And then that song ends with an outro, which actually came first before we had lyrics or anything like that. I knew I wanted to have this interweaving section where there would be Mark Bowles kind of singing, outro-ish type of interspersed parts with a Middle Eastern sounding chant and electric guitar interweaved with a choir. And it sounds weird. It probably is, but I suggest everybody listen to it to know what I mean, what you just heard.
Great track.
And it was very complicated to get it to time right, but I liked how it really turned out at the end, and I think it really just took kind of a neat groove and took it somewhere else.
Awesome. That track, like I said, I kept coming back to that one. I just like the complexity and the feel of it. It really does have a calming effect on me, and I really enjoy it. And I hope everybody else listens to it and listens to what you say too. Tone Poet is going to drop December 3rd. Mm-hmm. It's going to be available on your website. Probably, I'm hoping you're going to have it for downloads on iTunes and whatnot as well.
Yeah, iTunes, Rhapsody, the whole shebang. So it'll be everywhere that you can buy music online. Of course, CD Baby, my website. You'll find it everywhere. Anybody that even wants to get a hard copy, it'll be available through distributors at stores. May not be in stock, but you could always order it, or you can just get it direct from my website.
Because I'm a hard copy geek. I like to have a physical CD in hand. I like to read the liner notes.
I'm the same way, and I find a lot of people that I've talked to want the hard copy. They're totally old school like me, and I'm the same guy. I grew up, staring at album covers while listening to the whole album from front to back.
Yep, exactly. I gotta tell everybody that's going to be listening to this. It's artists like Adrian Galysh that are going to continue to bring that guitar wizardry to you. So I recommend that listen to this album and not just give it a cursory listen to. Listen to the depth and complexity of his playing styles, and you're going to hear what his influences were, and hopefully that'll influence you. Just got to give a little statement like that.
That would be amazing. The album is one of the important things that I wanted the record to be was that, when I grew up listening to music, and even to this day, my favorite records are the ones that when I go back and listen to it an additional time, I hear something new every time. It might be a little instrument part, it might be something about the words in the music, but you discover something new. And there's a lot of music out there where that isn't the case, where you hear it once and you'll hear it again and nothing ever changes, For instance, Todd Zuckerman's drumming. Every time I listen to it, I hear something brilliant, I hear what he's doing, and then I go, oh, well, he's doing that because he's hearing this in my guitar part. Or there's something, where, like you said, you might hear one of the solos and go, wow, that's kind of reminiscent of so-and-so or something like that. And I like that, I will never deny that I am the sum of everything that I've ever listened to in my life. So, I roll it all up into one and, add my own experience and sound and that only my fingers can do, and that's what's there. But, albums like Dark Side of the Moon, are huge for that very reason, is that every time you hear it, you discover something new. And it's my hope that the album Tone Poet does the same thing.
And I think that being diverse in your roots adds to that. I know there's a lot of people that I only listen to metal, I only listen to this band or that band, and why limit yourself? Then you're just going to be a clone of that band, and you're not going to grow, and you're not going to add to what you've learned from them. And I think that with so much music out there, you can create a new sound taken from those roots.
Yeah. I tell students, because I still teach a lot, I go, music is made up of pretty much three elements. You've got melody, rhythm, and you've got harmony. And either an artist's sense of or vocabulary of rhythm, harmony, and or melody is interesting or it isn't, because they're going to use the same 12 notes as the other guy. And once you kind of understand and appreciate what makes that interesting, then it doesn't matter if it's Willie Nelson, Sepultura, Devin Townsend, Mozart, or Uli John Ross. They either have something interesting to say with those elements or they don't. And all you're hearing differently is maybe, one guy's playing a Telecaster, one guy's playing a violin, and one guy's playing bongos or something. So, to me, it's all music, and there's good music, and there's maybe not so interesting music.
Right. Exactly. We've been talking to Adrian Galysh, one of my newly found favorite guitar players, and I'm not just saying that just because you're on the phone with me. I'm enjoying the music, and I'm enjoying the, you reminded me of, some of the guitar players I listened to earlier, so that's carrying it on. That's perfect. Tone Poet, it's out December 3rd. I've had a great fortune of listening to it from start to finish several times. And it is a really wonderful record. And I recommend people pick it up if you're a lover of music. And right now, the floor is yours, Adrian. We're talking to 140 countries. Tell people what you want to tell them.
Wow. There's great music out there to be found, and obviously there's a lot of music to kind of sift through. But if you find music that you like, especially if it's an independent artist, because there's a lot of us out there that are working really hard, support them, either, by purchasing, their music or telling your friends about them. We very much appreciate it. And don't be afraid to reach out if you like us, to ask us any questions or say hello or thanks or anything like that. Most artists, such as myself, would be glad to meet and talk to as many people as we can.
Awesome. Ooh, one thing before we do go,
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be taking this music to the road?
I don't know about the road. Luckily, I live in LA, so I know I'm starting to ramp up my live engagements. When I was recording this album, it was taking so much of my time and effort that I literally didn't play for a year. But I usually gig out here at least monthly, if not bi-monthly. There's going to be a record release concert in December. Not sure of the venue, date, or time yet, but people could always, check out the website for an update on that. But after that, yeah, the next plan is to play as much as possible, as often as possible.
There you have it. Adrian Galysh, Hellion Rocks. We'll be back soon.
Thank you.